like to formally announce that the Houston Rockets are officially out of the playoffs with like 20 games to go in the regular season. I'm just saying, earlier tonight, the Los Angeles Clippers took down the Houston Rockets 120-105 in a game that wasn't even close. I know it was just a 15-point victory, but trust me, it was more like a blueprint for the rest of the National Basketball Association, specifically the teams in the West that are going to be in the playoffs, as to how to take down the Houston Rockets. I'm sure at some point later tonight, LeBron will send a text to Kawhi and say thank you. All of that, and trust me, a whole lot more coming up on the Mighty Rip Pod today. I am Dave DeBaugh, and I want to talk sports with you, North America. But we begin, as I try not to ever do this, but we begin with the Los Angeles Clippers. I really try never to kick off a show with the Clippers. I remember watching the Clippers in the 80s and 90s. I remember watching the Clippers public relations team actually pull people off the streets and hand them tickets and ask them to just go sit down so that it looked like there were actual people in the stands. It's sort of the thing that the New York Knicks are going to have to do if they ever want to see a sellout again, as long as Dolan is the owner of that team. Now, as for the Houston Rockets, look, I'm not trying to be funny here. I'm actually being true. The Houston Rockets small ball experiment that Mike D'Antonio is running, which I'm really was excited to watch. And I think it works really well against, some teams in the National Basketball Association. But the second they run into anybody that has any players on its team that I would call have the ability to play tree basketball. They're big, they're strong, they're rooted in the ground. They have muscle. They're taller than 6'6". Mike D'Antonio. I think Mike D'Antonio is the tallest person on that Houston Rockets team at this point. I'm just saying the Houston Rockets small ball experiment has officially been shattered by the Los Angeles Clippers earlier tonight, as the blueprint for how to beat the Houston Rockets in the playoffs was just sent out to the rest of the Western Conference basketball teams. Now, I know a lot of you out there are going to be like, DeBaugh, you're overreacting. This was just one game in the regular season, and it doesn't mean that much. I'm telling you right now, Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers took tonight's game seriously. I'm telling you right now that the Houston Rockets took tonight's game seriously as well. Both teams wanted to win tonight's game. The last thing the Houston Rockets needed to do was get blown out at home against the Clippers, which is exactly what happened. Look, I might not be doing this podcast tonight if the first 3 quarters of that game had been any different, but it wasn't, as the Clippers just flat out destroyed the Houston Rockets. It wasn't even close, and I'm about to tell you how they did it. Now, as you might imagine, as you all know, I'm a huge Russell Westbrook fan. I want to be a huge James Harden fan. I'm a big James Harden supporter to some extent. I think, the pressure of the playoffs actually gets to him. It's sort of like one of those things where players, when they make it into the National Basketball Association and they're rookies and they've been in the league for a year or two, it takes some time to get up to speed. I mean, a lot of the great players have to fail first before they succeed. That's how the world works. Like nobody would actually be doing a podcast today if the first podcasts that were officially done actually succeeded. They failed miserably. Podcasts failed forever. And suddenly there was a resurgence, and some people really took to them. So they became popular. And it took a long time for that to actually happen. I'm doing tonight's podcast. Really, it isn't even a podcast. I'm doing it on YouTube. So somebody's going to have to tell me how that's actually a podcast. Anyways, And so the Houston Rockets. So James Harden has been through. He's been in the league long enough. He's failed enough in the playoffs. He's been nervous. I don't care what he says in like a press conference, but he's clearly not the same player when the playoffs roll around. And last year was the first year that I saw him actually really consciously make a decision to want to be better in the playoffs, which he was for the most part. But this year is different because they don't have the same defense in place. They don't have the rim protection that they had last year. They don't have the bodies. They've made a strategic decision to go with small ball, and that's just not going to work in the NBA in the playoffs. And that's why it's officially easy for me to actually count them out of the playoffs. As far as I'm concerned, there are only 6 teams in the West now. Look, I love Memphis, but they're not winning anything. There's really only 6 teams in the West that have a chance of going to the NBA finals this year. And when we all sort of sit back and look at it, we're like, it's really only the 2 teams in Los Angeles. And there's not a chance in hell, barring injuries, that the Houston Rockets can actually find a way to make it to the NBA finals this year, especially if they play the way they play tonight. The blueprint has been sent out, as I said, to the other teams. And it's really, really simple. Apply a little pressure to James Harden and beat him up at every possible angle. It doesn't matter if you get Patrick Beverley called for a flagrant foul, which he was. It doesn't matter. You rattle the cage of James Harden, and you're going to have a far better chance of beating the Houston Rockets. It is that simple. There's a lot more to it than that, but that was really what happened tonight. You might be saying, well, how bad was James Harden tonight? Like, how many field goals did he make? He went 4 for 17. 4 for 17 did James Harden go tonight. That's all I have to say about that. Look, the Los Angeles Clippers and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and Patrick Beverley and Lou Williams, the whole team, like the team didn't even play that good. They didn't even have like their best game. I mean, I think like Paul George had just like 13 points. He got outscored by Zubac. Zubac scored 17. Look, Marcus Morris Sr. scored 11. Kawhi Leonard was 8 for 15 for his normal 25 points. And that's really what happened in this game. Well, you might be asking, well, they acquired Reggie Jackson. What did Reggie Jackson do tonight? 6 points. Lou Williams, 5 points. The big difference was Montrezl Harrell. And that goes back to everything I'm saying. The Houston Rockets, as much as I want small ball to work for them, still need to have some trees sitting down in the paint. And Montrezl Harrell is a prime example of a strong tree that the Los Angeles Clippers have. I mean, he sets his roots down and there is no, like, literally a car could hit him and it would be dented. That's how strong Montrezl Harrell is. 19 points for him tonight. And it was just flat out destruction of the Houston Rockets. And that's the blueprint. That's how you beat the Houston Rockets in a 5-game or 7-game series. It's just not going to happen. And the sooner the Houston Rockets understand that, like if they understood that right now, if they got home, if D'Antonio goes home, their general manager goes home, and they come back in the morning and they say, look, let's try the small ball experiment next year, but let's get some height out of the G League this year. That is exactly what the Houston Rockets should do, but they won't, and that's why they're officially, with 20 games to go, out of the playoffs, North America. All right, thanks so much for tuning in to the Big Mighty Rip Pod. We are available on actual, not just YouTube, but on actual podcast platforms like Apple, like Google, like Spotify, iHeartRadio, and a bunch of other ones. So thanks for all your support there. Also, do check out our big website at mighty.rip. And that is the actual URL, mighty.rip. I know people are like, really? That's a URL? And yes, the dot and the rip makes it the actual URL. Thanks so much for all of your support and tuning in to the big Mighty Rip podcast. For the Mighty Rip pod, I am Dave DeBaugh, reminding you that sometimes players, coaches, and front office folks make horrifically bad decisions, like not allowing anybody on their basketball team over the height of 6'6". And it's our job as fans to set them straight.